Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the program for today. This is Girls Rule the Laws, leadership lessons for girls and women. Strength Has No Gender is the name of our series. And this one is called Think Bigger. For today, we have our wonderful panelists that you see before you on the screen. You have Assembly Member Catalina Cruz. You have the Fire Department Deputy Commissioner Cecilia Loving, and you have Attorney Margarita Rosa. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Before I get into the bios of our speakers, I just want to talk a little bit about what we do at Girls Rule the Law. Girls Rule the Law is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we have one mission and one mission only, and that is to introduce girls to the law. And by law, we mean the legal field, the legislature, and the judiciary. We do that in a whole bunch of different ways. One of those ways is my screen behind me, and that is through youth conferences. We hold youth conferences for hundreds of girls at the New York City Bar, pre-COVID, of course. We're hoping to get back to that soon. And at those youth conferences, we have a whole day event. We have networking breakfast and lunch. We have etiquette workshops. We have women like the ones you see behind me talking to the girls about their paths into the legal field, like the way we're going to be talking about today. And we also have speed mentoring, where last time we had 200 girls and about 50 women volunteers who sat with them and just talked to them about their careers and how to get into the field and things that they like and don't like about the profession. It was very exciting, and hopefully we will get back to that. We also go into the schools. We do law days for schools. We do mock trial debate. For Women's History Month in March, we will be providing a limited labor and employment class to the schools, one of the schools for girls. And we have one of our wonderful women volunteers who are going to be doing that as well. So this program today, for instance, is made possible through one of our other supporters, Karen Campbell at the Lewis Brisbois law firm, who donated generously to make the technology available for us today. So thank you, Karen, and thank you to all the ladies who are on with us today. So let's get a little bit into the bios for our speakers. First up is the Honorable Catalina Cruz, New York State Assembly member. Catalina was elected to serve the residents of the New York State Assembly's 39th district, where she has the privilege of representing one of the most diverse districts in the nation. This encompasses the neighborhoods of Corona, Elmhurst, and Jackson Heights in Queens. Catalina was born in Colombia and came to Queens at the age of 9. She grew up a dreamer. She lived in the United States for more than 10 years as an undocumented American. So she has that perspective that she's going to share with us today. She has had a diverse work experience before being elected to office. She served as counsel to the New York State Department of Labor's Division on Immigrant Policies and Affairs. She was the chief of staff of the New York City Council Finance Chair, Julissa Ferreras. And she began her career as a staff attorney, representing low-income, rent-stabilized tenants in the New York City Housing Court. So thank you, Assemblywoman Cruz, for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Next up is Deputy Commissioner Cecilia Loving, who is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the FDNY. Ms. Loving is Deputy Commissioner. She's also the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Fire Department of New York, where she provides leadership for a holistic and positive work environment for over 17,000 members. She previously worked as a law enforcement bureau attorney and EEO counselor for New York City's Commission on Human Rights, as well as a litigator for Patterson Belknap. She obtained her JD from NYU School of Law, her BFA from Howard, her MFA from UCLA, and a master's in divinity from New York Theological Seminary. So thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Loving, for being here.
Thank you.
Margarita Rosa is an attorney. She was the first Latinx commissioner for human rights, for the Commission on Human Rights. She was appointed by the first Governor Cuomo. She's an organizational leader and lawyer with nonprofit and government expertise. She has more than 3 decades of professional experience in the nonprofit sector in executive leadership and management. She served as the executive director for the Grant Street Settlement in New York City from 1995 to 2015. She is very adept with organizations serving underrepresented individuals, groups, and communities. And she is currently an active volunteer, philanthropist, and blogger with her own blog, Margarita's Table. So welcome, Ms. Rosa.
Thank you.
So you've heard a lot about what Girls Rule does. And I spent more than 2 minutes. I did give myself 2 minutes for that and I went over, so sorry. But I want you all to give us your elevator pitch, right? I want you to tell the young ladies who are listening, something short and sweet about you. We talk about elevator pitches with the girls that I work with at the schools and tell them, if you're meeting somebody, let's say Oprah, in the elevator, and you have 30 seconds, more or less 30 seconds to a minute to tell Oprah everything she needs to know about you so she can follow up with you, what would it be? So Assembly Member Cruz, let's start with you.
Thank you again for having me. My elevator pitch, never been good at those because, politicians talk a lot. But I was born in Colombia. I am the first Colombian-born legislator in the state of New York, the first Dreamer to be elected in the state of New York and only third in the country. I am a former immigration and labor law attorney, and I've had the privilege of being in office for 2 years and a couple of months.
Thank you. That was really good. Deputy Commissioner Loving.
Thanks again for having me as well. Hi, I'm Deputy Commissioner and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer of FDNY. I'm a lawyer, a minister, an innovator, and a winner of the 2020 Diversity and Inclusion Champion Award for creating a positive and holistic work environment for one of the largest organizations of emergency responders in the world. Almost 18,000 firefighters, EMTs, and prevention specialists, leading the charge of our core values: honor, service, safety, bravery, dedication, preparedness, and equity.
Thank you. Ms. Rosa, you're up.
Okay. I'm Margarita. I'm a woman. I am not too young, not too old. My race is human. My parents came from Puerto Rico. I have one daughter. I attended schools in Brooklyn, Catholic schools, went to an all-girls school for high school, and then ended up going to an almost all-male school for college, Princeton University. And after that, I had the opportunity to go to the Harvard Law School. And from there, I became a civil rights lawyer, I became a government official, or worked as a government official at some point. And then, as you heard, I headed the Grant Street Settlement. And the best part is that right now, I'm not on anybody's payroll. I get to do what I want. And because I really, really love learning, I'm enrolled in the Advanced Leadership Initiative at Harvard.
Thank you, Ms. Rosa. Now, so I don't have to keep saying your titles all the time. May I call you by your first names, ladies?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that was the icebreaker, right? Sort of. And Margarita, you kind of went in the direction that I wanted to go in, which is, why don't you ladies tell me something fun about yourself that's not actually related to what you do? So Catalina, let's start with you.
I am a runner and a dancer. I love going dancing. It's one of the toughest things I haven't been able to do during COVID. I would generally go dancing at least twice, if not 3 times a month.
Wow.
And I run anywhere between 2 to 5 miles, 3 to 4 times a week.
Awesome. Cecilia.
Well, I was going to share a little bit around one of my best friends who grew up with Vice President Kamala Harris in Oakland. But instead, I want to share something that's a little bit work related. And that is, when I joined FDNY, after I got into this role, the Hispanic Society told me that I should take the physical portion of the firefighters test, which is our test that all of the firefighters take to get on the job. And so I took that test and I passed it. So
very nice. Congratulations. Margarita, you're up.
Okay, so I'm Puerto Rican, and so people assume that for that reason I'm a good dancer. But actually, I've never been a very good dancer. But the funny part is that recently I decided to take dance lessons. And so I took dance lessons and I learned to dance salsa and tango and a variety of other dances. But my teacher was a Ukrainian man, a man from the Ukraine, from Eastern Europe, teaching a Puerto Rican how to dance salsa. But I learned and it was a lot of fun.
I could imagine. Thank you. Um, Assembly Member Cruz, Catalina. So you have mentioned that you were born in Colombia. You moved to the United States when you were 9 years old. Your biography, and you have just mentioned that you were a dreamer, having been undocumented for about 10 years. You had a single mother who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. And, how has that experience colored your view of the American dream and, what they tell us about, well, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and everything else like that?
Okay, for a very long time, and my political consultants would actually tell me to stop saying that, but I would tell people I didn't believe there was such a thing. There's this concept of what you see on TV and what you see in the movies, and somehow the streets are paved with dollars and everything is roses and unicorns. The reality of what immigrants go through is not that. And so for me, it wasn't so much that there was an American dream; it's that there was an American opportunity. Make of it what you make of it.
Mhm.
But even then, many of us have to cross certain paths and fight certain fights that are much tougher than everybody else who's born in this country. My mom actually was what you call a volantera, which is the women who give out flyers in the street for 50 bucks a day when we first came to this country. This is a
Wow.
highly educated woman who had been a nurse back home for like 13, 14 years, but because we had no papers, that was our American possibility,
Mhm.
our chance at earning an income. And gradually we progressed to the point where my mom is a preschool teacher now, and I became a lawyer. And
Mhm.
so I do think that it's not so much about this country representing some sort of American dream, is that this country represents the land of opportunity for many of us. But now, as a legislator, one of the things I fight for is that it shouldn't be just about opportunity and chance. Everybody should have some sort of level playing field where you have the same access to education, to healthcare, to housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because it's the only way that we're really going to create um, something that isn't just a Hollywood version of what the United States is supposed to look like.
Yeah. Thank you. I understand that completely. Um, Cecilia, your path is a little bit different, right? Like you've had a few different jobs before you've landed now at the FDNY, and you're a lawyer, but you worked outside of the traditional lawyer role, and you've been focused a lot on diversity, equity, inclusion over the past couple of years. So you've made that sort of your personal brand. So what made you take that trajectory, right, from actual practice of law to now trying to create this holistic environment at the FDNY and just moving into the diversity, equity, and inclusion space?
Well, one of the things that I say about diversity and inclusion a lot is something that I call the power of inclusion. And that is really a holistic approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, spirituality, and recognizing the power in all of us is really fundamental
Mhm.
to seeing and supporting and giving everybody a safe space to bring their best, to bring their authentic self. And so I've been an attorney for 36 years, but that's not the only thing that I've done or that I do. And I really believe that well-rounded lawyers are the best lawyers, which means they bring themselves mind, body, soul, and spirit. And so therefore I've always done a number of things in addition to practicing law. So for example, while practicing law full time, I led an organization dedicated to mentoring attorneys of color, one of the first in the country, the PALS program. I led its board of directors for 7 years. I served as an arbitrator also for over 20 years while practicing law. As an arbitrator, I decided cases like a judge. The only difference is that the parties agreed to me as a judge and the decision up front. And so I also went to seminary while practicing law full time and got a Master of Divinity, was ordained as a minister. I write books about spirituality and publish them. And I feel that I need all of these experiences in my role as diversity and inclusion officer. Lawyer, minister, writer, arbitrator, all of them are needed to really do my job well. And I think that there are two things that can be learned from that. One is that the law prepares you to do other things really well. I got all A's from seminary, the first in 100 years of the seminary's history. But also, you can do a number of things while you practice law.
Thank you. Miss Rosa, Margarita, you have dreamt big, right? Like this is what the title of the program is about, is dreaming big and setting big goals and achieving them. And you've done that for most of your life. It looks like Princeton cum laude, Harvard Law School, first Latinx, to serve as the New York State Commissioner on Human Rights. You were appointed by the first Governor Mario Cuomo with the messaging for girls, and in particular Black and brown girls, about not being too successful or too smart or too ambitious, so as to not to be intimidating to people, so as to not appear angry. What made you just go for it?
No, interestingly enough, I didn't plan any of it. Opportunities present themselves because other people believed in me, because I happened to be lucky. And instead of staying on one straight path, because I never had a straight path in mind, I would say, okay, I think I'll give that a try. And then I would do that and enjoy it and excel at it. And then something else would come my way. Like, I never planned to work in government. I was a lawyer. I thought I'd practice law as a traditional litigator my whole life. But government came along and I said, okay. And I gave it a try and I loved it. And then when Governor Cuomo lost the election and I was his appointee. So if you're an appointee of a elected official and they lose their position, you often then lose your position. I lost my position and the opportunity to head the Grand Street settlement came along. And I had no idea what that would entail, but it sounded interesting. So I thought, okay, I'll give that a try. I did that for 20 years. I think it's important to be open to those unexpected things that might come your way. Sometimes the things you least expect are the things you end up enjoying the most. And I also found that the farther away I got from being a litigator, the happier I was. And I think the reason for that was that I tell people that the litigators in the legal profession, we're like the gladiators. We come in and we cut off the end of the battle. We carry it away. And at some point, I said, I want to make peace, not war. I really don't want to litigate any longer. I'd rather do something else. And I had the good fortune of having the opportunity to do other things. And so I would say, be open to possibilities. And when you're offered an opportunity, one of the mistakes I've made sometimes is I've been a little unsure of myself and I've held myself back. Sometimes the holding yourself back that's the one person that can really hold you back is you. So if you take the chance, the worst that can happen is you're not as successful as you wish you'd been. But if you learn from the experience, it may have been worth taking the chance.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask an odd question for a bunch of women trying to convince girls to go into the law. And that is, what is it that you like least about what you do? Like for me, Margarita just mentioned one part about the litigation, right? That it's you really do have to be adversarial and sort of contentious to excel in litigation. For me, it's billable hours. I can't stand billable hours, sitting there and ticking away, every 6 minutes. So, Catalina, let's start with you. What do you like least about what you do now?
So my career as a lawyer, I've actually done different things. So there's things that I haven't liked about the different pieces of it. One of the things, and I'm going to echo what Margarita said, which is you have to remain open. about the changes that life brings you, not only as a student, as a lawyer, just in life in general, because you might end up doing something that you never even thought about. When I went to law school, my idea was I'm going to represent folks in immigration court. That's all I wanted to do. Nothing else occurred to me. I ended up actually doing housing, and I then realized I didn't like clients. I think it's a fair assessment. I was really good at it. I loved the confrontational part. I actually happen to represent the kind of tenants and housing court, which is very, very few that you could get to do jury trials and bench trials, because my tenants didn't really have leases. So you could actually do that. I had amazing experience, and I loved the litigation part. I loved picking jury. I loved arguing. I loved cross-examination was my best. What I did not like was telling another adult how to be an adult. And that's often, you end up a little bit of social work, a little bit of as a lawyer. And when I realized that while I was good at it, it was draining me and I was no longer happy, I looked to broaden my horizon, and I went into policymaking. And I joined the Department of Labor, later the City Council, later the governor's office. And I really enjoyed helping write bills, helping do project management. In that piece, what I didn't necessarily love was the politics of it, weirdly, because you often have to drive the politics of someone else. And so even if you might believe A, B, C, and D, but if your principal, if whoever you're working for believes in that, but thinks that F, G, and Z all the way at the end need to come first because that is in the interest of whoever they're representing, their constituency, that's what you have to do. So I didn't necessarily love that part, but I loved getting to do really, really good progressive work that changed the lives of a lot of people. And then now in running for office, in having run for office and actually taking office, I miss all of those little things. I miss interaction with everyday folks and the client work. And so sometimes I'll step in when my team is doing constituent services, which is very similar, and I'll listen and I'll talk to them. I still get to do the confrontational part when I'm arguing on behalf of the bill, or I'm actually on the floor of the assembly debating something. And I have to do the politics all the time. The one thing that I don't love about this job, which has absolutely nothing to do with being a lawyer, is it's very expensive and you have to raise a lot of money, and that's a conversation for another day. Yeah. But that has nothing to do with being a lawyer. And so I'm going to reiterate, because I think what Margarita said really resonated, because I had a vision of exactly what I wanted to do when I got out of law school, and I couldn't be further away from that, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. Thank you. Cecilia, what about you? What's the one thing that sometimes you don't like?
I have to agree with what's been said, that we do have to step into the unknown and do the unexpected. And the most challenging thing about doing this job, which for me was completely unexpected, is that diversity and inclusion triggers a lot of people, because racism and prejudice is something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, because so many have turned a blind eye to its existence. They don't want to believe that it's really out there. And instead of getting mad at the system or the injustice of racism and discrimination itself, people like to blame the outcome on a person. And so sometimes I tend to be that target. Racism has existed for hundreds of years, for example, in this country. But since it's the work that I'm responsible for, people like to blame it on, blame me for it, so to speak. And so there's a term that is great to remember. And that term is called root cause analysis, root cause, getting to the root or the heart of a problem. And so that's a process that we use to examine a situation to determine its cause. And the truth is that healing relationships are a process. That's a process. It's a journey. As we call this work, it is a journey without a destination.
That makes sense. Margarita, what about you?
Well, currently I love what I'm doing, but I would say that of the other jobs that I held, the two things I guess I liked least, one was having to raise funds all the time when I was in the not-for-profit space. Mm-hmm. because that's a never ending, as you know, Mirna, a never ending process.
Mhm.
And I used to say that you have to worship at the altar of 1,000 different gods, and every one of the gods wants a different offering. You can't just tell them, I have this wonderful program. Will you fund it? You could tell them that, but they want to know what special little piece of it is really relevant. I mean, is going to please them. And I found that rather frustrating. And the other is supervising people, the human resources side of work. And at every job, most of the jobs I held, except when I was actually representing people in court, were involved a certain amount of supervision, so to speak, or management. I really didn't enjoy that part very much. I was happy when I had HR people, human resources people, to turn these issues over to and let them put their expertise to use in dealing with them.
That makes sense. Cecilia, you started to talk a little bit about the work environment, and sometimes when sorry, my voice is going. And sometimes when people need to vent and blame someone for something that they're not happy with. You're also in a male-dominated environment.
Yes.
Right, with the FDNY. So do you get pushback to your authority, not just because you are in the D&I space, but because you are in the space of leadership?
Well, the interesting thing about the space that I'm in is that it's a paramilitary organization. And that means that we're almost like the military, the Army or the Marines or the Navy, but we're not totally. And so that means that the department itself adheres to a lot of the same conventions as the armed forces. And the thing that's good about that for me is that everybody knows how to follow what they call the chain of command. They know how to follow orders for the most part. And so I'm considered a senior officer. Pursuant to court order, I report to one person, and that's to the fire commissioner, the person at the top, just like a high-ranking or 5-star general. And so when I need their help to accomplish something, they tend to respect the chain of command, because if they don't, we have a disciplinary unit. And if they don't, they can lose their jobs. So I don't tend to get that kind of interference.
Yeah.
I grew up also, I should add, with 4 brothers, and we fought every single day, which really toughened me up as an attorney and as a person in general. And I've also only worked in male-dominated environments. I spent 22 years at law firms that were mostly men. And so one of the things that I just want to insert quickly is that what I find sometimes more troublesome is pushback from high-ranking women like myself. And so women, we don't always have each other's backs. And so I think we need to be very mindful about being accountable, both as men and women, and be honest with ourselves as to whether or not we're doing our best to help people who look like us.
Thank you. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Margarita, I'm going to pivot over to you. One of the things that I have seen that disempowers women, and particularly women of color in the workplace, is what we call microaggressions or micro inequities, right? So when someone or a group of people tries to undermine you, but in a way that is subtle, and sometimes you can't really put your finger on it, right? But it's damaging to your psyche and to your confidence, because that's what it's designed to do. So we just had an election cycle, and we saw a debate, that quickly became a meme and was shared, was the fact that when Kamala Harris went and was debating Mike Pence, he repeatedly interrupted her, and she had to keep repeating with a smile on her face, "I'm speaking," right? And it was frustrating for a lot of women. Like, a lot of women were getting traumatized by this because we felt that in our souls. So what is it that you can do in a situation like that when there is a microaggression or a micro inequity? It's consistent, it's persistent, and how do you fix that?
It's not easy. I think one of the things that I can think of now that didn't occur to me when I was experiencing those things is to ask people why they're doing it. When somebody asks you like a really stupid question because they think that, oh, this is a brown person or this is a woman, and they're making ridiculous assumptions sometimes about you. I think one way to do it is to say, you know what, I don't understand. Why did you ask that question? I'll give you an example of a macroaggression as far as I'm concerned. I worked with a white woman for many years, and we worked well together. And then she went on to be the head of a city agency. We had worked together in a state agency. So at that point, I was head of the state agency. She was the head of the city agency. And I went to some events at which she was present, and she would say the following. She would introduce me. Oh, hi, this is Margarita Rosa. She used to be my general counsel. Now, I was general counsel of the New York State Division of Human Rights, but the general counsel reported to the commissioner, and she was never the commissioner. So I never reported to her. But there was something in this dynamic, and I thought what it was her to put me in my place. In other words, although I was the state commissioner, she wanted everybody to make sure that I had once been subordinate to her as she saw it, you know? Yeah. And I have to say, what I did was just simply, I was infuriated, but I didn't respond. And I think in retrospect, if I had it to do over, I would say to her, I need to understand why you introduced me that way. I was never your general counsel. You know, why do you feel it necessary to do that? It makes me very uncomfortable, and I don't think it makes you look very good. Now, of course, this is many years later, and I have time to think about it. But I think asking a question like that sometimes is a good way to approach that kind of a situation.
Yeah, that is true. I've told the story. Hasn't happened in several years now, but I remember working at a regional office for a pretty large insurance company, and I was a regional assistant general counsel. And I've always worn my hair natural, right? You know, and I came in one day with my poof, and a white woman came to me and she said, "Our supervisor is going to come in tomorrow, right? From I think it was Columbus, Ohio." And I said, "Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know." And she goes, "Oh, I'm just letting you know so that you can do something a little more professional with your hair when she's here." And, you know, I've been in the diversity and inclusion space for a long time now. So I knew to interrupt it at that time instead of letting it fester. So I smiled at her and I said, you know, okay, again, thank you for letting me know. I said, but what is it about my hair that you find unprofessional? Mm-hmm. And she got offended because, you know, as Cecilia said, sometimes people do. And she's like, "Oh, don't make this a race thing." But you felt comfortable enough to walk across the room to come over to tell me to do something professional about my hair. So why don't you tell me, what do you expect me to do with my hair? And she just walked away. But at least, you know, I felt good that I had addressed that situation then and there. So let's move on into goal setting, because that's what we're here, right? Like, you know, we're talking about these big goals. So I have this cup on my desk, and don't judge me for my messy desk. I'm going to share the screen with you so you can all see it, and the young ladies on the call can see it. Let's see, where are we? There we go. And it says, and hopefully you will be able to see it. Can you see the screen? Okay. So it says, right, dreams don't work unless you do. And the reason I have this cup on my screen and, you know, on my desk is because, and a few other things too, like inspire, right? That's what we do at Girls Rule, is inspire. I'm not bossy, I'm the boss. I'm like talking to myself. But the reason I have these dreams don't work because unless you do is because that's exactly true, right? You can dream the biggest dreams that you want to dream and have the biggest aspirations, but unless you put in that work and actually, you know, set a plan for getting to those goals, you're never going to get to them. So let's start with you, Assembly Member Cruz, Catalina. When did you decide, okay, this is going to be my big dream, is to be a legislator, to run for the assembly? And what did you do to get there?
So I had a little bit of a thought when I was an intern that running for office would be something I would do. But I thought, it's like, it's gonna be my retirement plan. I'm gonna have a full career as a litigator. And then when I know, because women do this all the time, and then when I know everything I need to know, and when
Yes.
I'm fully prepared, I will.
Yeah.
I was an intern with the Attorney General, and we had just done a gigantic couple of $1 million case. This was when Cuomo was Attorney General, on immigration services fraud and people that were defrauding our immigrant communities, fake attorneys, et cetera. And I was like, oh, this is what if you run for office and if you're really fighting for your community, this is the kind of thing you get to do. So like in the back of my head. And I went on to do what I needed to do and get prepared and all that other stuff. And fast forward about 7 years, 8 years later, I was working for an elected official as her chief of staff. I was the boss of everything, as I tell my own chief of staff, and I got to see what a compassionate, driven elected official, a woman of color, the first Afro Latina to ever chair the finance committee of the city council. She was like the third most powerful person in the city, and I was like, oh, I like this. I could do this. This is really good. We could do really good stuff. And when she decided not to run for re-election, there was a shifting of seats. Mine became empty. And I teamed up with people who really love our community and who love me. They are my friends and had my back. And we came up with a whole plan of how we were going to get to do this. And we knew that it wasn't going to be easy because I ran what is called an insurgent campaign. Back before it became popular, I was actually I think I was the first in Queens to ever win without the Working Families Party, without the Democratic Party. Like I won my nomination because people thought that our plans and our vision is what the community needed. Mm-hmm. And so we set out to say, this is how many yeses and votes we're going to get. This is how much money we're going to fundraise. This is exactly who we're going to reach out to. And it was very hard. It was so hard. There were days where I wanted to give up. There were days where I would wake up and cry, and good nights when I would go to sleep and cry. But every time I would think about what was at stake, and having been the first dreamer elected into office is a huge deal. And what I would always tell myself was, even if I lose, the fact that I did this, there's going to be another young dreamer who now knows they could do this. Mm-hmm. And I was fine with that. And I'd say, I can always go back to, I'll put up a shingle, I'll be a practitioner, I'll go work at a state. I will be fine. But I had my vision, I had my dream, and we executed it. And here we are, starting my second term.
Yay. Cecilia, same question for you. How did you decide this was a goal you wanted, and what did you do to get there?
I want to shift my response a little bit to two tools that I use in general, because I wasn't looking for this opportunity. And we talked about earlier about just being open and receptive. And so the two major things that I use in my life, and I try to make it a daily practice, is that I meditate and I use affirmations. Mm-hmm. And so how do you meditate? It's simple. It can take a minute. You can do it up for hours, but you just close your eyes and you focus on the breath. You breathe and focus on the breath. That's the simplest way to describe it. When other thoughts come up, you just dismiss them. As a minister, I see that as the highest form of prayer. I have a meditation website that I've had for about 8 years now, mindfulnessgroup.blog. It's free daily meditations. And so meditation centers us in the awareness of the power that we are, which helps us in turn manifest our goals. And so the second thing that I do is affirmations. Affirmations are taking our goals and writing them, saying them out loud as though they have already taken place. Mm-hmm. And so it's believing in them with gratitude. So here's a quick example. If one of your goals is to get a summer job, you wouldn't say, I want a summer job. You would say, I have a great summer job. You're saying it as though it's already happened. It was just what I wanted. I'm having so much fun. I'm learning a lot and I'm getting paid too. And so you would keep these kinds of affirmations and change them based on what you want. And you would say them out loud. And we have an expression for that. We call it speaking truth to power. Mm-hmm. And so that's speaking the event as though it has already taken place. You want to keep that to yourself and say it out loud. Sometimes you can do it 4 or 5 times, do it every day. And so the most important thing about the affirmations is that they will happen. This will work. So you want to be careful what you ask for. You never want to wish anybody ill will, because what we give always comes back to us.
Oh, that's interesting. Margarita, on to you. You have accomplished some big goals in your life. I know you're just saying you're just being a human being right now, but you have done some massively big things. So how did you get to those things?
When I think of my years at the New York State Division of Human Rights, I hadn't planned on going into government. I had this opportunity I was 8 months pregnant when I was hired as the general counsel of the New York State Division of Human Rights. And it was, so needless to say, I got off to an interesting start in a new job. It was a job, I'd never supervised anybody. And I had supervisory responsibility over a bunch of lawyers, some of whom were old enough to be my parents. So it was a little bit of a challenge. My first job supervising people, supervising lawyers of all people. And I was very, very young, seemingly young at the time anyway. I think that the thing I did, I was fortunate in that I liked what I did. And I think that when you like what you do it well for the most part, And so I didn't have aspirations to hold a higher position in that agency. I just liked my job and I did it the best I could. And I liked it. And then what happened was an opportunity presented itself to become the executive deputy commissioner, which was the next highest position in the agency. And when that opened, I didn't think of applying for it. Somebody else said to me, Margarita, are you going to apply? And they said, you should apply. So I said, okay. And I applied, and I was very, very well qualified for the position. So I got that position. And then I held that position for a few years, and I did that really as best I could. And then the commissioner position became available. The man who had hired me when I was 8 months pregnant moved on to take a position in city government, and his position was open. And somebody said to me, I hadn't thought about applying necessarily. They said, Margarita, are you going to apply for this? I said, yeah, I think I may. I knew that agency better than I think any living person at that point in time. So I applied, and Governor Cuomo appointed me. But I have to say that one of the good parts about all of that was that I really enjoyed every single job that I held there. And so I did it with a great deal of enthusiasm, commitment, and it just opened the opportunity, the possibility for moving up.
Okay. That is true. Let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to ask the question I always ask at these events, whether it's a youth conference or law day, or now the leadership lessons for girls and women. And that is, knowing now what you know, what advice would you give to your younger self? And I'm going to give you a couple of ages. If you could go back in time to the time you were 13, when you're just starting to think about life and starting to grow up, what advice would you give to yourself? And, what would it be? And then also, would that advice change at like 18 or 25? Catalina.
This gets a little bit deep, and I don't think we were looking for necessarily for this. But at 13, I was trying to survive. I was living in a household that was abusive, and I think I would tell myself, "You're going to be okay. This is going to pass, and you're going to be okay, and you will survive." And I think at 25 what was the other age? I was
18 and then 25. Yeah.
At 18, I would have told myself, don't marry that guy, finish college and go through life. And at 25, I would have said, told you not to marry that guy. That's actually when I got my divorce. But at 25, I would have told myself, you can do this, because that's around the time I started thinking about law school, but I was very hesitant. One, because of the financial implication. Two, it was because I would have had to depend on a man so that I could actually go to school. And that was, for independent Latina women, it's a very difficult reality to have to accept. And I would have told myself, it's okay. I think I was I graduated law school 27. So I was like in my first year of law school around that time. So I would have told myself, it's okay. And you're going to be an amazing lawyer. And you're going to get to help people, and all the sacrifices and everything you have to go through. It's okay. Go make your mother proud.
Oh, I like that. Cecilia?
And so mine is somewhat similar in that I grew up in one of the roughest parts of Detroit in a housing project, went to a high school that was like Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech. And except it was predominantly Black. But the kids that I was around, their parents were really successful surgeons and lawyers. And so I would tell myself to keep my head up, to stay focused, and to be confident that I would accomplish my goals. I ended up getting full scholarships to Howard University, UCLA, NYU, all of the places that I went. And the universe helped me accomplish those goals by using those same affirmations that I mentioned. I use those things as a kid also. And then similarly at 25, I would probably tell myself to slow down and not be, worry about trying to marry, particularly my first husband. I believe that as females, we spend a lot of time focused on romance as an indication of success.
Yeah.
But I think that we really should get to know the people that we choose to spend our lives with, and to make sure that our values align. So we need to take the time first to figure out what our values are. By the time I got married, I lived in DC, LA, New Mexico, Colorado, and New York City, but I still needed to get to know me a little bit more and not be tied to a relationship. And so I would say, don't rush into marriage.
Yeah. Margarita.
Okay. What do you say? What do you say to yourself to keep going? Is that the question?
No, if knowing what you know now, if you could go, you have that time machine and you can go back to 13, 18, and 25, what advice would you give yourself at those ages?
I think at 13, I would say, keep doing what you're doing. I was always interested in helping other people. So I would volunteer I once volunteered at the American Red Cross, and my parents had to take me to get working papers. I wasn't old enough to work. I had to get working papers. They used to have to give me money for car fare because I didn't have any money. But it was important to me to do that. I volunteered at our church to kind of do religious instruction and tutoring with little kids. So that was I didn't realize that, but that was really leadership building for me, those activities. And that has continued to drive my interest. It wasn't about necessarily having a big career, or being a big shot, or making a lot of money. Really, I was always driven by some sense that there was something bigger than me that I wanted to dedicate my time and my talent to. 25, I graduated from law school. I guess it was I guess I would tell myself, you're going to have to jump through some hoops. I went to a corporate law firm right out of law school. I was with 90 lawyers, only 9 women. I was the only lawyer of color in the entire law firm. It was not necessarily, it wasn't a hostile environment. It wasn't welcoming. It was just whatever it was, but I didn't enjoy it. So I hung in there until I got an offer at the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund, where I could go and be doing work once again that really made me feel like I was making a contribution. Anti-discrimination work on behalf of Latinos. And so, 18 was when I graduated from high school. So I'm going backwards. 18, I was going to an all-male preppy university only in the second year that they had admitted women in their entire hundreds of years of history. And I was a person of color, a woman from a low-income background in an environment of rich white guys, many of them from the South. It was not necessarily a welcoming environment. So what I would tell myself is, actually, I did the right thing. Now that I think about it, I would say, do what you did. So in reverse, I would say, get involved with the other students of color, learn from them, be mutually supportive of each other. Don't think you have to master everything yourself. Work in groups, which I didn't do as much in terms of studying. Form study groups, learn together rather than try and get everything in your head all by yourself, sitting in a room by yourself, which I did. Make and get involved in other activities in addition to your academics. Something that gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of reward, a sense of meaning, a sense that you're giving to something bigger than yourself. And I think that propelled me, and I think that can help propel all of us.
I think so too. We're getting towards the end, and I see we have a number of questions. So for me, I think if I could give myself advice at 13, 18, and 25, it would probably be the same advice. And that is to be authentically myself. I have a similar experience to Catalina, not the undocumented part. My parents were undocumented, but they were able to get their papers before they went to get us to Honduras. But I came from Honduras when I was 6. And I hated being the odd person out. I always felt like I didn't fit in. I was an Afro-Latina, so the Puerto Ricans and Dominicans didn't really consider us Latinos because we were dark. And then the African Americans didn't really consider us Black because we weren't African American. We didn't have that same background as they did, and that shared history. So I think for most of my life, right, up until I got to the point like I was in my 30s, and I was just like, you know what, this is who I am. I'm not going to change it. I was always trying to be one thing or the other. So going back, I would probably say, enjoy your food and your frijoles, your tortillas, and, and just be authentically yourself. I didn't reclaim my name until maybe 10 years ago, right? Like, there are no Mirnas in Honduras. There's Mirnas. So like, I just started, introducing myself as Mirna. And that was very important to me to reclaim that part of myself, to be authentically myself. So let's go into some of the questions. We have a question from Christine Rodriguez, and she says, would you tell us if and how mentors helped you shape your decisions to make bigger moves in your career? So Catalina, let's start with you.
So it's cutting off. Can you repeat that?
Sure. Would you tell us how mentors helped you shape your decisions and make bigger moves?
Oh, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. So I call them madrinas. I have some of the most amazing madrinas who have shaped my legal career, from Justice Jenny Rivera, who, when she was a professor at CUNY Law.
She just posted a comment. You called her with your mind.
There you go. See, she swore me in, as a matter of fact. And she took my resume when someone at the AG's office was looking for an intern. I never even applied. And she's like, this is one of my students. She'd be great. And my entire life has changed since. And so when I got elected, I called her and I said, you have to swear me in. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for you putting me down the right path, I would not have had all the other madrinas that came after,
yes.
Including Elizabeth de Leon Vargava, who was the deputy secretary for labor under Cuomo. And she just, anytime there was an opportunity, they mentor me from everything on the microaggressions, mm-hmm. Litigation, research, sometimes even how to be comfortable in your own skin when you're a lawyer and you're going into yes. rooms. And so I feel extremely lucky. And one of the things I have done every single day that I can is say, I may be the first, but I cannot be the last. Whether it's as a dreamer, as a woman, as a lawyer, as a Latina. Mm-hmm. So I've mentored several young women who want to enter the profession. And sometimes mentorship means telling folks, this might not be what you want. Mm-hmm. Because what you want is to do X, Y, and Z. You may be able to do it some other way. That's what a good mentor does. Puts everything in front of them and supports them in whatever decision they're going to make. I feel extremely fortunate and lucky to just have these amazing Latinas in the law, in politics, who just guided me and made me be an even better lawyer, person, human than I already am. And some of them have been non-lawyers, and some of them have been men. You know, I've had the wonderful opportunity to be mentored by Alfonso David, who used to be the general counsel for Cuomo, and now works doing human rights. Actually, I think it's human rights, the organization that he's at. And you know, a good mentor teaches you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and lets you decide. And I'm just extremely lucky, and I'm going to continue to do that however I can. So if any of the young women who are watching us now want to contact me via social media, I often, after many of these events, I set up calls. I mean, I'm about to get into the heat of budget, so it'll take a little bit of time. But feel free to feel free to send me a message on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. I answer my own social media, and we can set up some time to talk. Catalina, Cruz, NY across all the handles. And it's even if it's via Zoom and through a text, good to see you, Judge.
And I just want to say that Judge Rivera is one of those great madrinas, right? For the non-Spanish speakers, madrina is godmothers, because she does the same thing for me. Every time I've called on Judge Rivera, whether it's through my work with NISBA, I'm the chair of the Committee on Diversity and Inclusion, and we have events, whether it's for these types of programs where girls rule the law, Judge Rivera, you know, I'll email her and I'm like, can you help me out and appear on something? And she's like, absolutely, every single time. So she's a great madrina. Cecilia.
So I want to give a shout out to Judge Rivera as well, who was my classmate at NYU. And so we're friends from many, many years ago. One thing that I want to say about mentoring that I really want to stress is that you never know where your good is coming from. Your classmates, the people around you. And, you know, one of the experiences that I had is that there was a secretary at one of my old law firms who was also a lawyer, and I mentored her and I treated her the same way I would treat the other lawyers. 20 years later, she ended up in several powerful positions, and she ended up hiring me. You never know where your good is coming from. Yeah. As a law student, I had a party. And so many people told me not to invite a particular person. And gratefully, I listened to my own judgment. I invited her. And several years later, she advocated for me to get a really great job, which caused my salary to triple. You never know where your good is coming from, and your credibility, how you treat other people, whether or not you're on time and professional, is very important.
Yeah, it's true. Another question, Margarita, did you want to talk about mentorship, or do you want to go to the next question?
Well, you know, I could talk about mentorship in a different way because, you know, I'm probably the oldest person of the three of us. And when I was growing up, there weren't that many people who looked like us in positions of authority or in position, you know, who had preceded us in the profession. Who we could rely upon. But when I was a student in college, we kind of mentored each other in a way. We had something called the Third World Center in college, and all of the students of color, whether, you know, mainly whether they were African American or Latinx or Asian or Native American, we were all together. And so we learned together. We would kind of let each other in on what was going on. And there were some guys a couple of years ahead of me in school who knew the ropes, and they would tell us, you know, kind of how to find our way. In the legal profession, well, let me say the following. I also had a teacher. She's still in my life. She was the head of the guidance department when I was in high school. She is now 83 years old. She was in her 30s when I first met her. And she just had a lot of belief in me and supported me, pushed me to apply to Princeton, was there for me in a lot of situations, just heard me out. She didn't necessarily, she wasn't a lawyer. She didn't know how to be a lawyer or some of the struggles that I was experiencing. But I think that what was important was the moral support, was that, person who has known you and continues to believe that you can succeed, continues to hear you out when you're complaining or whatever. Uh, and so that to me was very important.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna, since we have just about 10 minutes left, I'm not going to pose the same questions to all of you. I'll pick one to answer the question so we can get to all of them. Joy Dingle asks, which skills can young women start improving now so they are prepared to find their own successes in the legal or political fields? So I'm going to give that one to Cecilia, if you don't mind.
In terms of improving skills now, I would say your writing skills are really important. We don't think of that until we are in law school. Also, your research skills. And we have, as young people, so much research available to us via Google and other things. And so it's really learning how to dig deep beneath the surface to research as well as to write. Those are the main two that I would lift up.
Okay. Skylin Ortiz asks, what made you decide to go into the law in the first place? Catalina.
So I actually wanted to be a cop when I went to John Jay for undergrad. I used to dream that I was going to be the next Olivia Benson. For those who may be too young, it's Law and Order Special Victims Unit's heroine. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. But, I wasn't documented, so I couldn't really do that. But as I was going through the process, I met a wonderful private practitioner who took my case pro bono for free and basically was like, I'll help you with the whole process. He helped me become a permanent resident, a citizen, later helped me petition for my mom so that she could become all of those things. And it made me understand the power of the law to change not just the life of the person that's in front of you and who is your client, but all those lives that that person touches. He didn't know that because of what he did for me. Now I could help my family back in Colombia financially. I could help my dad who was alive then, my grandparents. Like I could do all these other things and I could help myself. And so I said, that's what I want to do. I want to practice immigration. I want to do what he does. And I became obsessed with going to law school. And it was another attorney who went to CUNY Law, and there was an article written about her who her life was very similar to mine, Mercedes Cano, who basically had lived homeless and undocumented in New York, later became a union organizer, and then went on to CUNY Law School. And I was like, oh, that's the school for me. If someone can do this for that student I wanted for me. And I decided to then pursue CUNY and pursue my career in the law.
Atibek Cintron just asked that very same question, like, who was your role model? And, do you think of yourself as a role model to other people now, to someone else now? And I think that's a good one that I would like all of you to answer. So Catalina, you can just expand on whatever you just said.
I've had many different role models. I think, we are humans, we are flawed. And I think part of what we have to understand when we're looking at a role model is that. And so, from Judge Jenny Rivera to Elizabeth de Leon to our Secretary of State, Rosanna Rosado, to my own mother, there's different pieces of the women in my life that I admire and different things that I see them as my role model. One of the things that I think we should never do is say, I want to be like them. I want us to think, I want to be my own person, but I want to take some of the advice they give me. I want to take some of really good things about that particular person, and I want to be my own person. And I have been told that, especially because of my former status as undocumented and how far I've gotten. I often get folks and people telling me I'm a role model, and I have to be honest, I don't like it. It's a lot of responsibility. The way that I like to look at it is, don't look at me as a role model, look at me as a resource for your own growth. If you ever need my help, if you ever need advice, if you ever need a friend, if you ever need someone to just, de-stress with, I'm your girl. But don't look at me as a role model, because I am human, I am flawed, and I'm bound to make mistakes. And weirdly enough, before this conversation started, I was texting with a few friends about some stuff that's happening in politics right now and how difficult it is for elected officials to sometimes say, I'm wrong, and here's how I could improve, and here's how I would do it better. Because we're human, but people in my line of business are very egotistical, and it's okay to say you're wrong. It's okay to admit it. I think it makes you a stronger person, a stronger elected, and a stronger leader.
I agree. Cecilia, would you like to answer the same question?
Sure. One thing that I want to lift up about that question and that very excellent response, which I agree with, is how I have based my ability to sponsor and mentor based on how someone else role modeled that to me. And that was one of the partners at my first firm who had clerked with 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices and one of the preeminent judges in the Southern District. And he took me under his wing. He made sure I had the best assignments. He worked with me always. He stayed by my side. He helped me do my depositions. He made sure I got more than my share of the work, examining witnesses at major trials. And the important thing about what he did for me is he said to me, no matter what happens in your career, you will always have come from this firm. And I tell my partners that. And so he gave me the benefit of his privilege and his legacy. And then I began to do that for other people. And so he didn't only impact me, he impacted people like Judge Margot Brody, who I mentored, Judge Ray Loyer, who I mentored, the late Ken Thompson, who I mentored, and so many others, because I looked out for them and the same way that he looked out for me. And I'm sure that it's had an ongoing impact in the lives of other people.
Yeah. Margarita?
So I've had interesting role reversals, so to speak, sometimes. I went to college and had a friend who was a freshman when I was a junior. And we remained friends. We're still friends today. And I think she looked up to me. I wouldn't say she saw me as a role model, but I think she's written about it. She looked up to me. She has gone on to be on the Supreme Court of the United States. And so I have now had the opportunity to look at her through a different angle. I recommend that everybody read the book, My Beloved World, written by Sonia Sotomayor. It's a wonderful book. It's an easy read, and much to my surprise, I'm mentioned in it. So that feels very good. But I want to tell you a little, and I don't perceive myself as a role model, but I do know that there are many people who are still in my life, actually, who I worked with, who are much younger than I, and also seem to look up to me. And I sometimes look up to them because now they've acquired skills that I might not have. Like some of them are tech people, and I don't know a whole lot about tech, but I can call on them. Sonia, I can call on her for any number of things, even though she was a freshman when I was a junior. But, there's a lot I can learn from her. And I do. And so, that whole role model thing goes back and forth. I would have to echo what Catalina said, that it's a little bit uncomfortable to see yourself as a role model because, as she said, we're all flawed. But if you see yourself, as she said, as a resource for people, as someone that people can come to, tap into you for information or support, I think that's the way I prefer to see my role.
Well, we are like 3 minutes away from our end time. So I just want to give you all a few last opportunities, I guess the last opportunity. If these young ladies and women who are on the Zoom call today, if they can take away just one thing from you, what would it be? So Catalina, let's start with you.
Do it for the right reasons. Whatever it is, whether it's going to law school, whether it's choosing one type of law versus another type, whether it's actually running for office, do it because it's the thing that, and I had a high school teacher actually say these words to me: choose the job that if you had to get up on a Monday to do it for free, you would still get up and do it because that's the career that's going to be.
Yes.
Do it for the right reasons. Don't do it because it's the next logical step in your career and it's going to be great. Don't do it because your parents want you to do it. Don't do it because it's going to look great on your resume. or because everybody's running for office. As we all know, in New York City, we have almost 700 people running for city council, and probably only 1/3 of them should be running for office. Don't do it for extrinsic reasons, because going to law school is very tough, and unless you get a scholarship, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
If you're going to run for office, it's just as equally tough and very expensive. Do it for the right reasons, because you want to fight for people, because you know that your community deserves more, because you have something extremely unique or great, or even if it's not unique, it's just that drive that you have to offer.
Thank you. Cecilia?
I would say to remember that the power is within you, which means that the full power of the universe, of absolute good, of love, whatever you want to call that higher force, is inside of all that you are, and it never, ever leaves you. You can access it whenever you want and spend your life centered in your power, and realize that it is not for you alone, but that you are given the power of who you are so that you can bless and give to everyone. We are here to give to others, and remember that power.
Thank you. Margarita?
So remember that there's only one of you. You are very unique. Even if you have an identical twin, there's only one person in this whole universe who's exactly like you and who can contribute to the world what you have to contribute. And I hope that I would like to echo what the other two speakers said. Catalina said, do it for the right reason. For me, the right reason was wanting to make change in the world, wanting to leave the world a little better. Have it be better because I was here than it might have been if I hadn't been here. And, at this stage in my life, where I'm not thinking about career anymore, I'm thinking about my legacy. What will be said about me when I'm no longer occupying space on this earth? What kind of a contribution will I have made? Whose lives will be better because I was here? And if you have that kind of motivation, I think it helps you get through a lot of challenges, because we all have experienced challenges. We all will experience challenges. But I do think that if you do it for a cause bigger than yourself, and certainly bigger than your pocket, I think that that's definitely worth thinking about and shaping your life that way.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. Catalina, Cecilia, Margarita, for taking the time to be with us here today and give your wisdom to the young ladies who are part of the Girls Rule the Law world. I appreciate you. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
For the ladies who are on and watching, you can go to www.girlsrulethelaw.org to find out more about our programs and things that we can do for you and your schools. And we will continue to have these leadership lessons. This is the second one in a series of 13. So look out for the next one that's going to be coming in April. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too.